It's Friday. My name is Nikita Jervey of Kita's Peace, and I help those I connect with get their peace back by fostering deliverance, forgiveness, and love. And I am back. I'm back with another effing Friday message. Today's topic is fault. Fault Friday. F-A-U-L-T. And I always start with the definition. Fault is defined as a weakness or responsibility for wrongdoing or failure. I'm going to start this message by referencing a story in the Bible about a woman with an issue. This story can be found in Matthew 9:20 through 22, Mark 5:25 through 34, and in Luke 8:43 through 48. So there's this, I'm going to read it. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out of him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes? You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you asked, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet. Trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." So this woman had an issue of blood for 12 years. 12 years, guys. If this issue of blood was anything similar to a menstrual cycle or period, women, I'm so sure you can agree and say, like, I can't even imagine. She was basically bleeding nonstop for 12 years. And so if it was anything like a menstrual cycle is, I can imagine that there had to be some pain associated. There had to be some suffering associated. There had to be some weakness associated, because she's losing blood, constantly, nonstop, right? Excuse me. But I often wonder, when I hear this message, or I hear the story about this woman with an issue of blood for 12 years, like, what in the world was this woman doing for 12 years? Like, why 12 years? That's a long time. That's like a century plus 2 years. Okay. So it says in the scriptures that basically she went to several doctors. She spent all that she had, and yet she was still suffering. Not only was she still suffering, but she was actually worse off than when she went to the doctors when she started off. And so this story, the story about this woman, it really cuts deep, because I see myself in this woman, but instead of an issue of blood, I had daddy issues, and I suffered in silence, just like she did. She suffered for 12 years. I suffered for almost 30, guys, and I would go to a doctor, someone who I thought could heal me, wasn't like a doctor, but someone I thought that could heal me. I went to anger management classes. I went to a psychologist. I went to friends and poured my heart out to them. And then I also, found myself trying to be found and be made whole in relationships with men and stuff like that. And so, there was that. I'm going to these doctors, and then I'm also spending everything that I had, because it didn't say she spent everything that she had on the doctors, so to me, that meant that it was two things: that she went to these doctors trying to be healed, and then she also spent everything that she had. And so in my situation, I realized that I was spending everything that I had on the inside of me, all of my value that I had at the time, everything that I, believed in, my self-worth, my self-esteem, my self-love, my mind, body, and soul. I was giving away. I was spending it in an attempt to become whole, not realizing at the time that I was leaving worse than when I came. I was leaving with more issues than what I originally came in with. And so when I realized that none of them, none of the doctors, none of the things that I did, or the time and talent that I spent, none of it healed me. And it was at that time, that I was finding fault, in everybody else, finding fault in my dad, finding fault in those doctors, those men, those friends, those situations that weren't healing me like I thought they would, and so now the finger is pointing at them instead of at me. And so after moments of blaming them, there comes a time when it's like, okay, it can only be their fault for so long, right? Then you start blaming yourself, which I'm so sure that this woman did. Like, once she got tired of blaming those doctors for not healing her, she started to blame herself. Like, she maybe began to think that the suffering, the bleeding that she was going through was her fault. Maybe it was something that she did in her past, because there's no background of this woman in the Bible. There's nothing to say what happened to her prior to these 12 years. All it says is that she's been bleeding for 12 years. So there could have been something that she could have done differently that maybe would have prevented her from having the issue in the first place. I'm sure all of these thoughts maybe crossed her mind, and she's blaming and finding fault in her actions, finding fault in her past, and finding fault in herself, just like I did. Like, you sit there and you're like, whoa, like, how could I have made this different? What could I have done to be better? And so on and so forth. And, you find fault and so on and so forth. And so, but I feel that had to be what she was doing, because how else can you explain 12 years of suffering when when she knows in that time there is a Jesus that can heal? You know what I'm saying? Like, the only example, or the only explanation rather, is shame. She had to feel some type of shame. She had to feel fear. She had to be insecure. You know what I'm saying? I mean, the fact that they mentioned that she spent all that she had meant to me, in my mind, I'm thinking she must have had a lot to spend. You know what I'm saying? Like, why else would you mention that if she didn't have a lot to spend, right? So a woman of her caliber with an issue like hers, like, no, I can't go to Jesus for help. So I'll find a surrogate. I'll find a doctor that can help me. I'll suffer in silence before I admit I have an issue, and that's exactly what I did as well. And, to kind of go to the left a little bit, I recently heard, I don't know if y'all been seeing, Will Smith, he's doing like these inspirational little clippets on Facebook and Instagram, and they're really, really good. So I recently heard one of his. It was a message on fault and versus responsibility, and he said that although finding fault in others is our emotional self-defense, it's natural to do that. Like, you did it to me, and because you did this, I'm this way, and so on and so forth. That's a natural response. But thinking like that, feeling like that, it keeps us as a victim. Because they did this, it caused that, and it's a cycle of victim mentality. But the way that you overcome that mentality is by taking responsibility for how you move forward. Yes, it may have happened, but how do you move forward from here? And basically he was saying that, moving forward and recognizing what happened and blah, 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 that's not an admission of fault on yourself, saying that you personally did something wrong or anything like that. And it's not even a way of letting whoever's fault it really is off the hook. It's just a recognition of your power to move past your past. And I thought that was really powerful, in dealing with this fault message. So, you go back to thinking, and it's like, okay, well, whose fault is it? And that's what, your mind automatically, it's like he said, it's an emotional self-defense. But, you go from blaming them to blaming yourself, blaming them, blaming yourself. Whose fault really is it? And, when it comes to me, it's like, were my daddy issues my fault? You know what I'm saying? Were they my fault? Of course not. I didn't ask to be born. I didn't ask my parents to have me. I didn't ask for my dad to be in and out of my life. And just like this woman, she didn't ask to be bleeding for 12 years. She didn't ask to suffer in silence. She didn't ask for all of her money to be spent, but what God has showed me, throughout this process of learning to forgive and move past fault, is that even that if it, some of what has happened to me, the issues that have evolved in my life, even if those were my fault, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Fault, the word, the meaning, everything, fault becomes an obsolete word once we take responsibility to move forward and come to him. It wasn't until this woman with the issue of blood pushed her way through the crowd to touch the hem of Jesus' garment that she was healed. It wasn't until I pushed past my fears, my insecurities, my pride, and fell at the feet of Jesus. I was literally on the altar crying, God, help me that I was healed and got my peace back. And so today, guys, as we discuss fault, don't suffer in silence. Stop searching for whose fault it is and look to the one that can heal the deepest of issues, regardless of what your issue is, whether it's daddy issues, an issue of blood, or somewhere in between. It doesn't matter. Stop trying to point the finger and look up, because he's the only one that can heal those deep rooted issues, not a surrogate doctor spending money and spending everything that you have on the inside. None of that is going to help until you go to Jesus, till you fall at Jesus's feet in the name of Jesus. And so I just thank God that he healed me from my issues. And today I pray that you will take the opportunity to give your issues to God. I pray that this has blessed you. And if you have daddy abandonment, unforgiveness issues, or you just want to get your peace back, get your copy of Daddy Issues today on ketuspeace.com, Amazon, Nook, or iBook. It's an awesome book. I wrote it from a place of peace, but in reference to the place where I was before, when I wasn't, when I was looking for fault, and when I did do some introspection and had to see where I was at fault for some things in the issues that were in my life. And so it's a really great book. Like I said, you can get it on ketuspeace.com, Amazon, Nook, or iBook. And next week, come back for another Effin' Friday message. I am Nikita Jervey, the Peace Promoter, and I love you. Follow me on all social media at Ketus Peace. Until then, have a great day.